Ladies and gentlemen, we are so glad to have you here on this fourth episode of the Kibos podcast. And none other is on the other side of my screen than Argyris Mokios from Kibos, the head of Kibos founder. How are you doing, Argyris?
Doing great. Hi, Dan. Nice to see you again.
Yeah. Today was a very exciting day because, as you have told me, you check to see whether the world even needs Kivos anymore, or if ChatGPT can just give us all the answers regarding how many cartons of milk the store down the street is going to need next week. Of course, you pointed a less direct question at ChatGPT, but please shed some light on what was going on. What were you thinking, and what were you asking the smartest thing in the world?
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, it's very popular these days, right? The GPT, ChatGPT, all these technologies, and I mean, quite frequently I bumped into some, LinkedIn posts from, colleagues that, they ask some questions, and these questions, sometimes they get closer to the supply chain side of things. So I was tempted, to be honest, this morning to actually ask ChatGPT how to manage efficiently the inventory in a retail supply chain network. So I was amazed by the results in the fact that I was expecting some bullet points, and this is what came out. So let's say how to 7 steps. Most of the steps, to be honest, I've already predicted they will be there, but the details of each step is actually the essence of the discussion we're having today. So
Yeah.
as you would expect, point number one came to be forecasting, right? Makes sense that you need to forecast to understand what's coming up to you in order to be able to predict. So that was the first step, and then the second step was, setting the order points, which means that you need to understand what level of inventory you're going to keep. Then it was something like, for me, you can miss or hit. It was, just-in-time inventory, a methodology to, let's say, have the right amount of inventory, which is everybody wants to do that. So okay, but there is, let's say, a process out there how you could do that. Then you get another step to prioritize the inventory. And again, this is also common understanding that yes, of course, you need to focus on different bits and pieces. You probably need to, maybe invest more in some areas rather than others. So the fifth step was when I was saying, aha, maybe we will get something here, but then again, we missed it again. It was optimize storage. Okay, so again, of course, you have, space in, stores, warehouses. You probably need to optimally manage that. But then again, that's also partially optimizing. And
Mhm.
the sixth step was collaborating with suppliers. Of course, that's really true. I mean, suppliers are a very critical part of supply chain. You order from them, they have a lot of dependencies around them. So yes, very good point as well. And the final step, step number 7, was analyze the performance. Yes, everybody will say that, yeah, we're solving a problem here. You need to understand how you're doing. You need to measure to be better. And that was all of it. And
So, what was missing?
yeah, something was missing. I mean, to my surprise, this is the guidelines, how you need to follow that up. But for me, the missing link was that all these steps are fine, and if you take it one by one. But how about connecting all of it, all the dots together, and doing something like a global optimization of the problem? Because in the end, every bit in the way, all these steps can lead you to different directions, and then you can do some suboptimal things in every step. But how do you do the whole thing together? Because in the end, the question initially asked was efficiently manage the inventory, right? We
Hmm.
didn't talk about the details. The tool came with some answers, and the answers, of course, I mean, more or less everybody knows that the tool, what it does, this technology, it has been trained around a vast amount of books, papers, articles. It's about a language problem.
Language.
Exactly,
Yeah.
that's what it does. So it didn't came up with that, and that was a disappointment. But then again, it wasn't a huge disappointment for me. I was expecting that to happen. That's why I asked the question to get it back and say, okay, yes, we're in a good state of understanding that we are solving and approaching the problem in the wrong way. And the second thing for us was that, of course, number one was forecasting. Everybody's focusing on that. Unfortunately, many people stop there, and that's a problem because that was even for the GPT tool to understand. It illustrated 7 steps, so you shouldn't be focusing 90% of the effort in step one, because to me the other are more tricky than the first one. So anyway, and even when we elaborate a little bit more and ask a second question, okay, forecasting, fine, but what kind of forecast? What type of it do we need to succeed, right? And the answer was, let's say, again, expected to what we hear. It was about, yeah, you can do qualitative forecasting, which means if you don't have data, try to find out, between experts and, move on. To be honest, that was a little disappointing in the terms of the context. I mean, having a retail
Mhm.
supply chain network and not having data, that's probably not something you expect in 2023, right? To happen. Nevertheless, it was one of the types of the forecast, qualitative. Then time series forecasting, again, probably a lot of the books, the majority,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
have that. Then causal forecasting, meaning you do some time series forecasting, but then you have a regression model to focus on elements that has a causal effect, like promotions, events, and things like that, which is
Okay.
fine. And then we also got judgmental forecasting, similar to qualitative, but I think because you still have the experts deciding and moving on. And of course, the final type that was recommended, okay, you can combine some of the previous approaches to mix and match and then come to something better in terms of the results. So what was the thing that was missing? Again, no mention of stochastic forecasting, not even, in a different name, probabilistic, right? So nothing like that. And so summarizing, I mean, we didn't go further and ask more questions because we had already enough of, let's say, the evidence we wanted, that this great summary leads to what we discuss in many of the podcasts we have here, is that if we neglect the fact that the world is so uncertain and you need to be forecasting and expecting multiple outcomes and calculated chances of it outcome, if you don't have this perception that there is many things could happen with some probability, then you're probably missing also the bigger picture, which is you need to formulate the problem you're trying to solve as a global optimization problem, because in the end
Mhm.
you're trying to maximize something. You have a goal, a single goal. Either it's going to be growth by revenue, by profitability. You're an organization, right? You're making an investment, you're expecting something
That
back.
that
Missing
was
that
that was
link, it's a
Yeah,
problem.
that was my exact feeling as you were going through what ChatGPT said. My feeling was that, oh my goodness, like this is exactly the same scenario, the same situation as what happened with all of our podcast episodes and all of our recordings and everything that you've talked about so far, is that this seems to be like the common knowledge that it's great. We have bits and pieces and elements of the system. We are lacking a few crucial elements, and we don't have this global overview. So your conversation with ChatGPT to me sounded like all the conversations with your prospects and your clients that you have told me about. It's that, it's the mindset or the understanding, like the common understanding is there, but there are these crucial elements that are missing. And this seems to be this exact same thing with your buyers and market and with ChatGPT, which is not a surprise because ChatGPT represents quite
Exactly.
accurately the common understanding about
Exactly.
subjects.
Exactly. I mean, as we said, I mean, if it's trained on, all the book, journals, articles, whatever
Mhm.
it can find around, I mean, and everybody's talking about this, and we're missing the critical elements, then yeah, that's the missing link, and we need to fix that. And apart from the technology part of things and what it is there, it's also, I think, this approach is also mandated by the way retail organizations are structured today. Which what I want to say by that is
Yeah.
the organizations have all these different departments, different business units, and while it is a single organization, activities are split down the way. All these different departments and business units they follow their own, let's say, KPIs and business metrics, their own objectives of how they're measured.
Mm.
And the problem is that these are not aligned in the end, and they're not directly translated to what's, let's say, the common goal of the organization. Again, profitability, revenue, right? So we have this scattered different metrics around. They don't come together. So since they don't come together, there is no need for somebody to think about this global solution, the global solving, optimizing as a whole.
And whose role would this be, this bringing together the global overview at your typical retail organization? So who is it in there that should be keeping all of this together and bringing the picture together for everybody, for other parts of the organization as well?
I think that, again, in every organization, you would expect that the direction, every year you have somewhere to go, right? And you expect that, that your CEO is, the one who's communicating the high
Mhm.
level targets. I mean, we need to grow by 4%, five, whatever that is, right? And then you
Yeah.
take this super high level objective in a retail organization, then you need to break it down to the actions that needs to be done. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be, people doing, different activities. What I'm saying that they shouldn't be disconnecting, because they start with a common objective, then everybody breaks it down to his own activities, and then what is forgotten is that the minute you forget about the initial common goal and you
Mhm.
translate that into your own KPIs and you measure that and you report back based on that, but not based on the common goal, that's where things
Yeah.
break down. And I think that in a retail organization, the supply chain function, I mean, because supply chain, apart from, let's say, a functional business unit in the organization, is something that is a physical thing, right? It exists, but it needs to
Mhm.
operate that. In the end, most organizations consider the supply chain function as a support function, and that some ways meaning like a second class citizen, which is not true, because supply
Mhm.
chain is the first class, is the core element there. And when you treat it as a second class citizen and you expect that to execute your decisions and you're not aligned with it, then things break down. This is what I mean by, trying to consolidate the effort and rethink about the approach you need to take, because when you're designing and, let's say, you're forecasting in every department, do some actions, and you don't get into consideration what is your supply chain network ability to do, you're actually removing and missing out all the constraints. So you're solving a problem that is purely theoretical, right? Without the
Mhm.
constraints, you're never going to get there, right? And then you're pushing your decisions down for them to execute. And then supply chain runs like crazy because probably they haven't been aligned so well, so they need to
Uh-huh.
execute. But then again, things you have planned for may not be executable, and then you end up with overstocks, understocks, and things you don't have where to to place around your supply chain, and things get crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Is there, I suspect what your answer is going to be, but is there a simple or straightforward solution to all of this? Meaning that, we're not optimizing for the right metrics. Organizationally, we're a little bit off and set up in a suboptimal way. We don't have the global picture, the appropriate overview of the entire system. So we don't have the holistic understanding. Is there a common or a simple solution, something that you can prescribe?
Well, simple, depending. I mean, to
Yeah.
me, it's simple,
Okay.
right? But then again,
Yeah. Forget simple. Is there a prescribable solution? It's not going to
yeah,
be simple. I
it
understand
is. It
that.
is. I mean, again, to me, it's still simple. Yeah, you could consider it simple, but the complexity comes from, okay, the problem is complex, right? But there are simple steps you can follow. The only thing that, let's say, is a concern about that is how open is any organization to make the change and move forward. And, because it is some kind of a disruption you're going to get there, right? Because you have already deep inside the organization, the processes, everything has been built on this promise, on the different approaches of, it has to be perfect for every department. But then again, non-optimal for the whole picture, right? So
Mhm.
you need to rethink. You need to come together. And somebody might object here and say, wait a minute. I mean, there are so many processes. We have, let's say, SNOP, the sales and operation planning. I mean, this should be consolidating and having everybody talking together. But then again, I think that this approach and this process is, it's been there for such a long time. I'm not sure
Mhm.
that it has improved things so much. Sometimes to me it sounds like it's even very slow in the pace of how it moves compared to how dynamic organizations are today. I mean, we cannot sit around and trying to align when the supply chain and the consumers are running on a daily pace. I mean, it doesn't really work that. So to me, there are simple steps to follow, and to
Mhm.
proceed in this direction, we are planning to do a webinar for it. I mean,
Oh,
because
yes.
yeah, ideally, what we would like to have is to have a discussion, a conversation. Because if you try to cover these topics in a podcast, it will probably somebody will say it's a single mind point of view of things. While so we're planning to do a webinar around that, and we are inviting people to join and discuss and of course debate about these things, because it's a
Mhm.
good thing to have a healthy, productive conversation with everybody. So there we will try to analyze and discuss the steps you need to take in order to have this approach. And of course, to give you a heads up, we're not going to focus purely on forecasting, right? That will be a very tiny bit of the webinar,
Mhm.
because there are so
Mhm.
many areas we need to cover, and how we're going to model this whole thing to work together. And you will then understand, I mean, that's what we try to to explain to everybody, that
Yeah.
forecast is a critical part, but you can do much better if you focus less on that area.
Yeah, sounds counterintuitive. You'll have better forecasting results if you focus less on forecasting itself. I love it. That's very, very intriguing. Very makes me very curious. What kinds, what sorts of people are you expecting to come to this meeting? What positions or
Of
from
course,
what
I
walks
mean,
of life?
yeah. So again, for us, retail and the departments all have an impact in what we do. So it might be people from the buying teams, category managers. I mean, whoever has the concept of planning. I mean, even if you're considering that I'm do category planning or assortment planning, it has a huge
Hmm.
impact on the later stages, on whatever happens in the end, right? So people from this area of the merchandising side of the business doing the category planning, of course people from supply chain, planning about how the execution is going to be, how the inventory is going to be managed.
Hmm.
Demand planning, which is again for us, it should be joined together with supply planning. It should be one thing, the supply chain function. Nevertheless, in many organizations, demand planners are a separate unit. Yes, we expect these guys also to be part of the
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah.
And of course, the commercial directors. Commercial is again part of the whole process of how you buy and how you operate in order to execute and be profitable. So any area of the business, in some organizations, pricing and promotion planning is also again a huge impact on the demand and what's going to be executed. So in different organizations, these roles sit in different departments, but then again the whole concept is, if you're actually planning in order to do a forecast and has an impact on how you're going to buy and how you're going to sell, then probably this webinar is for you.
Awesome. So let's finish off by telling everybody, our dear listeners, when the event is happening and the fact that they can sign up on the link that will be somewhere in the show notes, depending on where you listen to this right now, in the LinkedIn post, in the show notes on Spotify or wherever you're listening to it. So it's happening on
April 5th at 3 p.m. CT. So hopefully, it's a good for some areas after lunchtime. For somebody, it's going to be Eastern than Europe is going to be early in the evening. But again, we hope to see you all there and bring up all the appetite for discussion and debate.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. Thank you so much, Argyris. And we'll keep the discussion open and going on the 5th of April.
Great, thank you, Dan. See you all there.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Tune in next time. Bye bye.